Okay, I think we're getting ready. So I realize that I have the role of party crasher, but there will be more party afterwards. There's still a couple of seats left if you want to. Yeah, and I have the great opportunity to open today's event, this evening's event. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Barbara Stöttinger. I'm Dean of the VU Executive Academy, running together with my amazing team this operation here, and really looking forward to a great event. When I looked at the title, the AI Dilemma, I thought that's perfect. Yeah? First of all, we're talking about artificial intelligence in a place, university, where knowledge is not only generated but used, and we have our own AI challenges here in research and education. But what I equally appreciated is that the second part of the title, which is called Dilemma, yeah? Acknowledging that the fact that there is no right or wrong, there is no good or bad, there is no black or white, but that actually we need a discourse, yeah? As neutral as possible, as open and open-minded as possible. And I think that discourse around these type of topics where there is no easy answer, there is no easy way out, is exactly what's happening in our programs at the Executive Academy, but what also should happen in all the interactions that we are cherishing together. Yeah, I'm very happy to see a distinguished panel here, and I'm going to hand over in a minute to Karin Apjarova, who's going to introduce our great speakers and moderating the discussion. Before I leave the floor to her, I would like to say a big thank you to our Female Leaders Network, who's actually been organizing this event together with the staff of the VU Executive Academy. Particular thanks to Natalia in the front row and Katharina and as well Karin for making this possible, and already a big round of applause to you for having us here today. I'm pretty sure you don't want to hear from me, you want to hear from our distinguished guests, so therefore I'm handing it over to you, Karin.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you. So, as Barbara has said, the topic of today is AI Dilemma, balancing the caution and excitement in AI, and it's super interesting topic, right? So we've already done a rabbit hole today. So it can go on until midnight, but we don't have actually time to stay here until midnight. Thank you to Executive Academy that we can stay here, but certainly we cannot stay here until midnight. So let me share with you some housekeeping information before we will start, and I will introduce our panelists. We are happy to take questions via Slido using a hashtag dilemma. And after the Q&A, after the questions, we will show you a demo from Microsoft. Actually, a demo of Copilot, your everyday AI companion. So I think that it will be very interesting. So let me start introducing our panelist, Claudia Winkler. Claudia is internationally recognized, award-winning impact innovator, entrepreneur, and serial founder. Claudia has co-authored books Sustainability Puzzle and Fast Forward, and actively shares her findings as a keynote speaker and advisor on sustainability, innovation, and digitalization worldwide. Happy to have you, Claudia. Welcome. Another panelist is Harald Leitenmüller. Harald is a Chief Technology Officer at Microsoft Austria. And Harald supports forward-looking IT initiatives so that the latest technologies can be used successfully and expediently. His focused areas are Austria as an ICT location, a fair open marketplace, technology policies, AI, and the competitiveness of the local IT ecosystem. Welcome, Harold. Really great having you with us. Julia Haas. Julia is an international law and human rights expert. At the office at the OSCE representative of freedom of the media, Julia focuses on policy research and development in the field of internal governance and digital participation. Her main interest is the impact of artificial intelligence on freedom of expression, digital and legal safety of journalists, gender and online pluralism. Welcome, Julia. Happy to have you here. And our last panelist is Martin Gieswein. Martin is digital humanist, author, and faculty member of the VIU Executive Academy. He is building digital and real communities, for example, as co-initiator of Digital City Wien, as a co-founder of the Innovation Campus Talent Garden Wien, and as co-orchestrator of Community Creates Mobility. Great to have you, Martin. Welcome. So, acquisition of OpenAI by Microsoft is argued to be one of the best corporate acquisitions in the world. And also, it has positioned AI as the top trending topic. Therefore, my first question goes to you, Harald. Can you provide insight into Microsoft's strategy and vision for AI?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me here. So first, it's not an acquisition that way, as we normally call it. It's more or less a research cooperation with some aspirations or inspirations we share in that context. So as OpenAI is researching on the general artificial intelligence solution, so that solves every problem and can handle all tasks, that's future vision. So we are more focusing on making this available to everybody, to make it accessible, to have a fair system, a fair access for everybody, bring this to the market at the end. Yeah? So we share a common technology vision, make this professional, secure, fair, we call this the responsible AI approach, more or less, so that it saves or helps humanity. And if you know the Microsoft mission, we call it, we want to help every organization and people on the planet to achieve more. For us, artificial intelligence is the instrument, the technology that supports our mission, and we are quite sure with this mission and our capabilities, we can bring this in a way to the market that it helps humanity. Yeah. There are some issues, we know, there's some risk that comes with it. And that's something I would like to position on the beginning here, because there's also a geopolitical tension going on. Yeah? Europe wants to catch up and so on. Whenever you bring such a type of technology on the market, if you innovate, yeah, you have to think about risk. Yeah? And that's the greatest misconception in the global geopolitical competition. If you don't want to take risk, you cannot compete. Yeah? And I think that's an issue we have here in Europe. Yeah? Just owning the technology is not enough. You also have to own the risk when you innovate. Yeah? And that's what we think are accountable for. And that's part of our strategy, to take this risk. Because without risk, you cannot be leading, you cannot be innovative. Yeah? So that's a core part of the strategy. And if you are accountable, if you take this risk, you have to manage it. You have to balance this dilemma. Yeah? You have to be aware of the risk, you have to manage the risk, you have to not start with the competencies, you need the people, you need the partnerships and so on to deal with that. Yeah? So I hope that we focus our discussion not only on the dilemma, so my sense would be, if there's a dilemma, there has to be a balance. And if we focus on the balance on the right way, I think that will reflect more or less our mission, or our strategy that way. Yeah. And by the way, we invested a lot. Yeah. So we are now in the next phase, to bring this to the market, get more customers that hopefully pay for these services, and it will grow.
Maybe can you explain us what kind of a vision of the AI vision, what does it mean for us? Just a little bit more as a concrete example that people in this room might imagine what is waiting for them.
Okay. I give you some numbers. We once a year we make a study about work efficiency. It's called the Work Trend Index. That reflects feeling, situation, process, efficiency on your daily work, productivity work, information worker work. There's, I think, 2 to 3 numbers that are significant. 64% of all working people are overstretched. They have too many overhead on their shoulders. That means they are not creative, they are not motivated, they are not innovative, which at the end limits competitiveness of organizations. 70% of all these workers would like to delegate these overhead tasks to artificial intelligence. So with this situation, you can expect the tools we bring to the market, because productivity is our focus, our area sweet spot, will help you or should help you to automate these tasks that you feel are overhead. This daily office building stuff, reporting, analyzing, summarizing, these are the tools you could expect. And secondly, and that's why we call it Copilot, and you will see it, the tools will not replace you. The tool will augment your information, your work, and you are in the driver's seat, you will have the final decision. So when you think about tools, for example, in Word, in Excel, in PowerPoint, whenever, it will suggest what can be done automatically, and you just approve it. That's like a new virtual colleague. Copilot, think of a virtual colleague. You can work with him, you can discuss with him, you can reflect on him, and he will support, or it will support you in your daily work, and you will see it.
Thank you very much. So let's move now. What does it mean for us and the future of work? So Martin, the fear that machines will steal our jobs is centuries old. Okay, so but so far technology has created new jobs to replace the one that it has destroyed. Could this time be different?
No, I don't think so. No, not at all. I think that not AI will destroy any job or take away a job. It will be so that, and I want to put it positively, when you have AI skills, when you have digital skills, you have the freedom to do even more jobs that you have based on your education. And that's a wonderful promise. And I can only make small examples, and I take myself as an example. So I'm very business-oriented, analytical guy, teacher, and so on and so forth here at the VU Executive Academy. But I became more creative in the last year. I now have a very, let's call it a startup, friends of mine and I, we do AI-based designs of hoodies, individual. And we ask the person, what do you stand for? What kind of design do you want to have on your hoodie? And then we sell it. And I'm not saying that I'm an artist now, but with the AI, I'm now more creative. I can generate individual things. Yeah. When I, 10 or 20 years ago, say, okay, I have to promote my work as an employee or as an entrepreneur, then I had media. And it was, and it still is, a gateway, so to say, a gateway of quality. But on the other side, for me as a solopreneur, I don't have the budget to go through media. But now I'm on LinkedIn, and I have some followers already, and I get 40,000 impressions per month if I do good content, if I give value. And now I heard that AI is also in LinkedIn more strategically implemented, and it will give us more chances to do business. Okay, now we are talking again in the bubble of the white collars and so on and so forth. But when we understand that AI with the combination of robotic is here already, then we have the same possibilities with people that are more working with their hands, who have to be on site in the hospital, at elderly people. And I think that there will be so much more work, empathy work, that we so scarcely have today. We have such a shortage of that, and let's concentrate on this work and not have a bad advisor called fear that jobs are taken away. But it's to be communicated to a broader audience. I think in this room it's easier, but we have to do this in a very broad way, and this comes together with having the understanding what those tools can. And when they are in the Microsoft Office, then it's just a feature of PowerPoint, and that helps us in conveying this promise of productivity to everybody.
Yeah, thank you. I think this was comprehensive, because when you ask, for example, ChatGPT what kind of jobs will be impacted by AI, the answer is, I think that many people just ask this question, ChatGPT, that mainly manual workforce that deals with, that it will be replaced by robotic, but actually it's also knowledgeable workers. But we are now also explaining that it's not about losing a job, but it's actually helping our jobs to be more efficient, more productive, more creative, more knowledgeable, and even have a more brainstorming. So thank you, Martin. Claudia, I would like to ask you, in your book, Fast Forward, it has been mentioned that according, exactly, it's an amazing book, really, that according to research conducted by OpenAI and University of Pennsylvania, that for 80% of the workforce, 10% of their tasks will be affected by AI, and for 19% of the workforce, 50% of the task will be affected. What does it mean for us, please? Yeah.
In general, I'm also an optimist here, so poor you guys. You have lots of AI optimists here on the panel. And you too? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so look forward to Julia's comment. So in general, I share a lot of the things that Martin has said. I think there is a lot of opportunities in terms of augmentation, and there is also, and we have to be aware of that, automation that will replace jobs, and it will have also an impact on creative jobs, which we haven't seen before the public launch of all these generative AI tools. So something will happen. The study of OpenAI is just one of, I think, thousands of studies that are currently out there, and you probably came across some of them. All of them vary quite widely in what they say, depending on which view you take. But one thing is certain, I think that's in one of the figures here, 80% of jobs that were analyzed will be affected. So most probably, from all of us sitting here, all of us in 5 years' time, especially in a knowledge worker space, will do a different job or jobs differently than they do now. It will not be like from today to tomorrow, but it will be a gradual evolvement, as you explained, Harald, or as you explained. I, for myself, I totally feel this too. There is a study by Boston Consulting Group that's all over the LinkedIn currently. I don't know if you saw that. The efficiency gain of consultants of Boston Consulting Group that use AI compared to those who are not using AI. And the numbers are really impressive. It's 12% more jobs get done, 25% of the jobs get done more quickly, and the quality is even 40% higher. And it's like, wow, and I feel it in my little startup with 7 employees every single day. We don't need to employ additional people and can do much more. So I totally share what Martin says. But I have to be a bit of a party popper here now. The issue is, just because we in our bubble will be able to use these tools, there will be jobs that will be replaced. Yes, we could focus and transition to a different kind of economy, but this transition phase needs to be managed, and we have to be aware that probably there will be phases of unemployment, and they have to be managed somehow. So discussions around the topic of how to, I don't know, tax machines or universal basic incomes are relevant questions currently. There is no solution out there, but it's the time now that we as a society discuss what we want. What kind of work we want machines to take over and what kind we want to keep for ourselves. And we can start in our own enterprises, in our own roles as leaders, and I'm talking to business leaders here today, to define what kind of jobs you want to let machines take in your company, so AI or robotics or whatever, and what kind of jobs do we keep with us. Martin did really great work on digital humanism, and he will elaborate on that a bit later, but I think let's be aware, it's positive, optimistic out here. Let's not treat it with fear, but let's not ignore that changes will be there, sometimes painful, and we have to manage them.
Thank you, Claudia. Coming back to you, Martin, if I may. How could we keep learning about AI to actually keep the competitive edge on the personal and also on a company level?
So I would consider myself as a digital pro, let's say so. So I really like digital. I'm in this industry for 30 years now. But now I started to learn again. I spend around 30 minutes every day to test the new tools, to use them in my work, because it's so fast developing, right? Okay. Then, of course, when you would look at the digital economics that are behind it and the business models, then you have a wonderful home here of this knowledge in the WU Executive Academy, where we are concentrating on two elements for our executives, and we call it AI for executives. First of all, the AI skills, but then as Harald and Claudia, you said, and Julia, I think you will argue in that direction as well, the ethics behind it. And the ethics behind new systems and the values that might be infringed of stakeholders with any digital tool, especially, of course, with AI tools. So we I'm here again starting with Professor Spiekermann, for example, at the WU Executive for 2 semesters now, understanding what might be values that we are infringing and how to discuss this publicly so that the fear is not coming here. So we have to learn a lot on that. You have the digital economics here in this house, but then there is so much out there, right? You see it on Instagram, you see it on YouTube, etc. And so let's be very practical. Don't go for the Instagram things. They are only here to get you look at the video again because it's not self-explanatory, right? YouTube videos are better, but then go with an Austrian startup, for example, mytalents.ai, that have a curated, scripted, and always renewed curricula on how to use those tools, for example. They are offering this for B2B, and you can tailor it as a learning path for your employees, that everybody gets the right tool sets and the right videos to learn from. So I think it's a big endeavor at the moment, and it won't stop. So what we always preached and preach, like the lifelong learning with the AI, it is so present at the moment that you have to do that. It's an easier learning, though. It's an easier learning. For example, I have, and I love to read your books, but in how many languages do you have fast forward? Let me show it for you so it's not advertisement. In how many languages is this available?
So actually currently in this one, but we're currently negotiating with quite a lot of publishers to have it published in many more questions. Our first book, we had much more difficulties.
I read it in German, and you can read it in Farsi. Just put it into a translator system and it not even takes 30 seconds and it's available. When I do my podcasts, where I'm trying to give people the possibility to catch up with the newest findings, then I was limited to German or English. My French is not good, and Italian I learned with my daughter, and she's much better than me. So, but with the new tools that are available, even as video and as podcasts, just shown today on the information of Spotify, every podcast is available in any given language based on those natural language models that are strongly connected with the AI. The learning will get much more easy if I get a paper, just like we did the paper, and you want to have an executive summary. I don't have to write the executive summary anymore. I put it into a PDF AI system and tell me what are the key points for me as a C-level, for example. So the learning is there. It's much stronger that we have to do it, but at the same time it's much easier. And I'm really looking forward also that my jobs as a teacher, for example, are away if the technology is so good that it's no need for me to transport theory anymore. Everybody can have the theory in a dialogue with the AI, and I can spend a whole day with you guys in the classes up there to discuss the application of the knowledge. Finally, yes, please, learn, but new ways of learning with AI.
Yeah, thank you. I think this was very practical, and you covered all the topics, so thank you. Julia, would like to ask you, now it's your turn. At the office of the OSCE representative of freedom of the media, you have been working on a dedicated project on AI and freedom of expression since 2019. Could you please tell us more about the project and AI-related initiatives?
Yes, thanks. I think I understand why I'm sitting on a separate chair than those other panelists. So, hi, thanks for including me and the OSCE in this conversation. I'm also very excited about technology, but I think the keywords we heard now is efficiency, productivity, we are way faster, we are more competitive, we will all be so much more profit-oriented in this kind of like global world of work and competition. But I think we also have to have a little bit of a more democratic human rights-based conversation about technology, and not only look at it from the perspective of productivity and about how we can maybe automate some tasks in the work field and how we can make more profit in that way. So I would like to add this a little bit kind of like human rights angle to the conversation. And as you mentioned, Karin, I'm working with the representative on freedom of the media, so I will speak specifically about AI in the information landscapes, but there are many parallels, I think, to any technology we're speaking about, and it's also important, I think, just to start off with saying why information is so important, because information is really the baseline of anything we do, anything we think, all of our personal, political, public decisions, individually, but also on a societal level. So information is really, or access to information and to reliable and diverse and accurate information is really the basis of democratic societies, and not about kind of like how we decided we want to live in our world and our societies. I think it's also important to mention maybe at the outset that this is also important in a security context, just because the OSCE is at the outset a security organization, and we find ourselves as a world in many, many crises. I don't need to tell you that. But from, I mean, the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, from now the horrible situation in Nagorno-Karabakh, climate crisis, the pandemic, I mean, all of these things. The second point is also when we look at elections, many of you might be aware that next year is really a super election year with more than 60 countries heading to the polls, 60 countries across the globe. This includes the US, the European Parliament, India is the biggest democracy, Russia is no democracy, Taiwan, which has a lot of geopolitical implications, many African states with huge, fast-growing population. So it's really also for that information is so essential. So we have to look at how we as individuals and society interact with information. And this is kind of like where I want to come in with the conversation of technology and AI. So if we look at how individuals and societies interact with information, we see a sort of monopolization in the information landscape. So we know that there are really a handful of very dominant online platforms from big tech companies that are some of the big competitors also of Microsoft. Microsoft itself is maybe not that big in the platform, social media platform sphere, but also of course has in this broader information ecosystem a role to play. And if we look at the big online platforms, if it's now Meta with Facebook and Instagram, or also TikTok now more, and Twitter or X now, and all of these different companies, we see that they really are gatekeepers to information. So we have to look at how they are moderating and curating information because they deploy AI for it. And that, of course, has an impact on us. And I want to give two examples maybe where like there are challenges, and I think this is also really links back to, I think, a little bit what we heard before about productivity and efficiency and profit. And I think, Martin, you briefly mentioned this in Instagram. It's only about that you watch the video again, and it's about attention and this attention economy. We have to be aware that those big companies that are really at the gate of our interaction with information, they make profit through advertising. How do you make profit with advertising? By increasing and optimizing, maximizing the time users spend on these services so that you can show more advertising and also gain and collect more data. That means that if the AI used is designed to boost engagement, that is not necessarily in line with diversity and accuracy, public interest, these keywords that I mentioned before, from a democratic, from a human rights point of view. Because what drives engagement, there are plenty of studies that show disinformation, sensational content, polarizing content, all of these things that maybe we as a democratic society would not want to be prioritized just for profit reasons. And this is a little bit my approach when we speak about AI dilemma, that yes, we can boost productivity, and that's great, and we should embrace that, of course. But profit and increase in efficiency should never come at the expense of human rights and of democracy. So we really have to look at these drivers. And we at the OSCE have looked specifically at the use of AI in content moderation and content creation, the implications this has for freedom of expression and media pluralism. And two examples, maybe just in the outset here, is that if we look at content moderation and the use of AI, I mean, yes, it's fascinating tools, but AI cannot understand context. It cannot grasp the very complex nuances of linguistic speech, of cultural and political context. It improves, I see you're moving, but still there are plenty of studies also of showing like how you can easily circumvent the rules that are embedded into the AI systems. So there are very often so-called false positives, where, for example, in online platforms, there is content wrongly identified as being problematic and taken down. That obviously censored legitimate speech, but at the other end of the spectrum, and equally problematic from a freedom of expression point of view, are false negatives, where content that is in fact problematic is not being identified, and then leads to a scenario where it can be used to target and to silence voices. And all of the studies show that there are even more problematic implications for marginalized voices and for those in societies who are anyway already historically discriminated against. So are these issues on the side of content moderation, on the side of content curation? It's really the question that I already hinted at in the beginning, that there is no economic incentive to expose individuals to a plurality and diversity of information. And it's all very much linked to this advertising and this surveillance-based advertising. That's a terminology that is now very strongly used in the human rights field in that regard. And then we obviously could spend much more discussions until midnight at least about manipulation, mass persuasion, discrimination, and all these things, and maybe we will dig deeper into it later, because also when we add generative AI and these things on top of it, there are even more questions that come up and more complexities. But maybe I just want to finish my first intervention on this. I think we heard before technology is not inherently good or bad or anything, but it's also not inherently neutral. And I think that's important to understand from the outset, that technology is always designed and developed and deployed in a specific context, by specific actors for specific purposes, and this has implications, and we have to look at it, we have to assess it beforehand, we have to identify risks and mitigate those risks. And it's important to look at the implication it has both unintentionally, because technology may play out in one or the other way, as well as really implications that come from malicious intent, which we of course also see, especially on a global scale when we speak about digital authoritarianism and all these keywords. But maybe more on that later. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, I think that now would be good to also understand Harald's point of view regarding also regulations towards AI. So if I may please ask you, Harald, what do you think about the regulations in terms of, for a company, like, can you please dig deeper and share with us your point of view on this topic?
I think the answer could be quite simple. I expect regulation to be useful, helpful, to give us guardrails to bring this technology in the right direction and saves humanity, more or less. Yeah? On the other side, for a company, heterogeneous situations in a global landscape is a challenge, especially, for example, in Europe. In each member state, when this regulation is implemented differently, it's not one market. So there are 23, 26, whatever markets suddenly. And in my daily life, this means that the company in Austria does not get access to this technology because it's only available in Germany or in France first. And this is a competitive disadvantage for this company because this technology is ramping up quite fast. If you're 1 week, 1 month behind, maybe you're lost. Yeah? So that's the backdrop of regulation, but we are supporting regulation. I think regulation gets implemented too slowly, yeah? Because AI is fast. Each new technology is coming faster and faster, and it takes at least 18 months in Europe to implement a regulation. Yeah? And it takes even longer to change a regulation if it's necessary. I think we never have changed any regulations in the European Union, and that might be an issue. Yeah? And second, the last one, these regulations are intersected. Yeah? We have the data protection regulation, we have the critical infrastructure regulation, now there comes the AI regulation, and a modern solution, think about the healthcare solution, it's a critical infrastructure solution based on personal data, and artificial intelligence, I would guess, is involved in some extent. Currently, regulation means for these organizations you have 3 authorities you have to work with. You have to register, you have to approve, you have to escalate, you have to align, because there are different timelines here, which makes it very complex. Yeah. So we are proposing, also we discussed this yesterday at the convent, a one-stop shop for these new innovative technologies, to have one authority that brings all this complex regulation together for one goal. Yeah? Because suddenly, if this is not in the hand of one regulator, you can play out the regulations in the timely sense, in the cost sense, and that's also a competitive game here. Yeah? That's why it's cheaper to build a data center in Ireland than in Austria or in France. That's tricking the regulators. Yeah? But regulation might make sense. Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. Coming back to you, Julia, how deep should state be involved in regulating AI, for example, human rights assessment, and what would be the right approach from the regional perspective? Kind of a reflection of what Harald have said. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's true that we face, I mean, it's a global conversation we're having. So, of course, if we speak about global challenges, we ideally want global responses and global safeguards. And because you asked specifically about the role of the state, I think, I mean, at least the approach we have been taking at the OSCE is, of course, from a human rights and from an international law perspective, where, of course, the role of the state is essential. So the starting point is always that states have an obligation to respect, protect and fulfill human rights. So there is a positive obligation, a positive element that they do not only not need to infringe your rights directly, but they have to kind of ensure an environment where our human rights can flourish. This of course also has an impact on technology, and human rights impact assessments that you raised are of course a very essential component of any sort of regulation, and I think to a certain degree would then also help this overburden of regulation you mentioned, that regulation is always lagging behind and that it's always kind of like only reactive, and then there are huge discussion, of course, also in the context of, for example, the negotiations of the AI Act that you mentioned in the European Union. It started a few years ago. The conversation about AI today is, of course, a very, very different one than even 2 years ago, and then democracy is about these inclusive processes that take time, where you cannot come up with the legislation in one day, right? So this is also a challenge, in fact, of course, but it's also kind of like the essence of how we come to, or how we aim to come to proper, smart, and considering all different aspects, balancing regulation. So what I want to say with all of this is, of course, that the regulation cannot react, therefore, to a specific technology or to a specific application. So it makes way more sense to try to regulate the environment or the kind of the ecosystem behind it, and to make sure that as soon as a new technology is being developed and or applied, that then there needs to be certain safeguards in place. But to be able to identify the needed safeguards, you of course need to first identify what could be the risks, what is the impact. So this is what this human rights due diligence refers to. That says basically, and many of you might be familiar with this concept also from environmental law, where they say if you want to build a house, you first have to look at what is the impact for the soil, for water, for the light, I don't know, for the different environmental impacts it will be having. And the same we should be asking from a democratic and human rights point of view, to say before we are allowing kind of a new technology to be deployed and to play out in real life, although of course online digital life is a real life, but to play out and to have real potential for harm and really impacting individuals and communities, there first needs to be an assessment, there first needs to be a proper inclusive process to identify what are the risks and to mitigate them, or in some cases maybe also say, okay, the risks are too high, this technology cannot be deployed in that application or form in the current state. So this is really where I see the need for the state to come in from this human rights environment and perspective. So just also to show a very cool book that we have been publishing. I mean, it's not really a book, but it's a publication on precisely the project that you have been mentioning on putting a spotlight on AI and freedom of expression, where we developed in more than 2 years with over 120 renowned experts from really diverse backgrounds and the entire OSCE region, guidelines for states on key principles for AI in information spaces and platform governance. And there are around principles like human rights due diligence, but also transparency, accountability, meaningful engagement, democratic oversight, and really this kind of principles that we want to see. One of the key elements is, and that I think links back again to this question of having different regulation in different places around the world, is that our main approach is really to focus on the processes. So not on the information or the content level itself, but on the processes that may be amplifying harmful, problematic information, and the question of reach, not speech. So really to say, how can we ensure that the ecosystem is human rights based and that there are proper safeguards in place in the first place. Another aspect that I think is important in this conversation is also that we, of course, need to be really inclusive in these processes. So it needs to be a multi-stakeholder approach. It really needs to listen to different voices, because especially with technology, we've seen over and over again in different contexts how problematic impacts or harms that have manifested themselves impacted different people in society differently. There is in almost all of these technologies a very big gender component. There are intersectional considerations, so any regulatory approach and policy approach really needs to take all of these considerations into account. And then, of course, ideally, it should be on the multilateral and international kind of level, which is incredibly difficult, not only because we have different regulatory approaches, but also because we, of course, have very different levels of rule of law and human rights protections. And we have also seen in some countries how, for example, legislation from one country that might have been not very problematic then was copy-pasted in a very different context when it comes to rule of law and safeguards, and then of course can be easily misused to really target and silence, for example, dissident voices or journalists, or also be used for gender disinformation, all of these different aspects. So ideally we have really a multi-stakeholder and inclusive approach to make sure that we have human rights safeguards, and all of these things need to be considered from the outset. So before we come out with technology, see how it can maybe increase productivity, but maybe also really harm and impact some people in society, and then try to identify regulation afterwards, and then have slow regulation reacting to implications, but rather say, okay, let's first look at it. What is the intention? What are possible implications? How can we mitigate them? How can we safeguard the human rights and democratic values we have fought for as societies and as humanity for so many centuries, and make sure that we are not undermining them now through a kind of approach of move fast and break things, as is this famous quote from Silicon Valley.
I have to comment a little bit. There sticks this impression that this is not done already, but that's not true. Since 2017, we have the responsible AI practice in place. It is published. We have the version 2.0 now publicly available, which is, by the way, totally correlating with the AI regulation coming in Europe. And we describe all these processes in this standard you mentioned, and also implementing it. There are practices in place, there are the tools in place that are mandatory for all products we bring to the market, that they comply with these requirements. And what strikes me very often when people think that development of such solutions are not done professionally, respecting these values from the ethical human rights up to the legal requirements. That's a minimum requirement currently if you play on a global market. Compliance is not enough. Law is not enough. You have to be far beyond these requirements, because you're also competing. You have to meet the expectations of the customers. So when a law gets enacted, and this will be the same with artificial intelligence regulation, it's the absolute minimum you have to fulfill. And if you stay on this minimum, you will fail at the end. That's also true for security and everything else. That's the minimum requirement. And I would argue we are already dealing with that in a very professional way. My issue is we have to scale it. Everybody has to deal with that on a daily basis in a professional way. So my daily business is mainly educating other people. What are these human rights? What are the ethics, discipline, and principles we have to respect? And most complex is, what's the praxis actually to do it? If you say fairness, for example, what does it mean? In a concrete solution process, when you develop a solution, it's not only that there's no bias. I think you mentioned this. Access to this technology, make it available to everybody in the same way, in each language, that they understand it the same way and leverage in the same way. That's access at the end. Otherwise, you failed at least in one principle. Just no.
No, thanks for this additional point. I also didn't want to say, I know we have come a long way. I think also companies and even companies not represented at this panel that are maybe, especially when we look at platforms and social media, even like more problematic from a freedom of expression point of view, we have come a long way, yes, but very often the conversations are still about ethical applications, which is a very vague term compared to a very strong human rights international law system. We see across the board how many big tech companies, again not referring necessarily to Microsoft, are firing people in their safety and integrity teams. We see it in many social medias. We see how a lot of conversations are really still taking place in an entirely opaque and very limited transparency when we see about the information that is kept by the companies, and we cannot even study, like there is no access to data for independent research. There's so many facets to it. I'm not saying that companies are not, some more and some less, are not trying to tackle their responsibility, but it's also not necessarily out of their goodwill, but also if you look, for example, already since 2011, we have the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, where also there is a very clear international responsibility of companies to live up to these standards. So of course there's a lot being done, but there certainly needs to be way more done, and I think there's a need for regulation and states to come in from this human rights perspective to set that framework and to set some standards that we are not even depending on the goodwill of some big tech companies, where some play out in a more human rights friendly way, and some just disregard it, fire their internal human rights teams, and just say, we want to make more profit.
It's fair.
Wow, I think that this one was a very good exchange of the opinions about the regulation. So I think that we cover it really, really deeply. So thank you so much, both of you. Claudia, now question for you. Some argue that AI will further increase digital divide. Okay, so how could we ensure that social justice with more equal and equitable access will be ensured to all?
So the digital divide is a topic that's very, very dear to my heart. I have a background in telecommunications, so I worked in senior management of telecommunications across Eastern and Central Europe for almost 20 years. And one of my main motivators then has been bringing people online, bringing people together, enable equal and fair access basically for everyone. I have two messages, a bad one and a good one. The bad one actually is almost 2.7 billion people currently do not have access to the internet currently. So it's about 1/3 of the global population. So that's the bad message. But there's a good one, which I'm very proud of because I'm from the telco industry. Did you know that mobile phones actually is the most equitable technology that's ever been out there? So the inequality of mobile phones on a Gini coefficient, like being fairly distributed to everybody, is just 0.2%, so very close to zero. So there's a really high mobile phone penetration and quite high access already. Sometimes it's a question of affordability, but still it's getting better. And I'm an optimist, as you already noticed before, so I'm also very optimistic that internet access, as mobile phone penetration is out there and mobile coverage is out there, will soon catch up. So I think that the topic of access is not that hard to solve. If we want to on a global scale, you can solve it with regulation, you can solve it with like government incentives to do so. So there are solutions out there. However, on the other hand, and that's something I want to refer to what you said, Harald, but also what you mentioned, what's more important in terms of digital divide from my point of view is not the access in terms of physical access and possibility to access, but AI literacy, like having a general awareness of what's out there, what can be done as general education of the dangers. I had a similar speech than Julia, what are the dangers out there, like deep fakes, filter bubble enforcement, all these kind of stuff that people have to be aware of that's happening right now. And educating people on these kind of things is very important, because if we don't educate people on what's going on, we have this digital divide in knowledge, or it's divide in knowledge, and this will block us as a society, global society, to reap the benefits and reinforce, as you mentioned, Julia, existing inequalities. So the digital divide per se, in terms of how we normally define it, access, I think it's a solvable problem. Maybe I'm too optimistic on that, but on the topic of AI literacy, there's a lot of work for us to do, and everybody has to get involved. So Harald, on a daily basis, says he's doing that. I think all of us here on the panel are here today because we want to foster that, and you are here today because you want to educate yourself and maybe transfer the message out there. Harald, you wanted to comment?
Harald, he would like to add something.
I want to share with you a secret. What's the success of OpenAI and ChatGPT? Yeah? And that reflects more or less what you are pitching here. Maybe you have seen these old user interfaces where you enter some text, this command line prompt, you know this user interface. And you have tried ChatGPT, I think so. Huh? Everybody has tried it. It's the same user interface. It's very simple. But there's one conceptual big difference. That's the paradigm shift. In the old user interfaces, you enter the solution. You have to know the syntax. You have to be an expert. In ChatGPT, in these AI-based new solutions, you enter your problem. You describe your problem. You get the solution. That's the big secret. That's the paradigm shift, why it's so successful, why 300 million users enter their problem statement and hopefully get their solutions. And there's also some aspect of literacy. And so suddenly, technology gets accessible for much more people if they're able to formulate their problem.
I love an example. I think your CEO brought that Davos, actually one of the fastest growing applications or quickly rolled out applications that really had an impact on the population was that ChatGPT was used to translate governmental services in rural India to make them understandable for rural people in India. So this would not have been possible before because before there were barriers, and now it's easier accessible. So these new technologies, is also with the Boston Consulting Group study that I mentioned, enable people with less experience to come to a higher level of knowledge. So that's a positive aspect, but we have all to work on it. I think that's the message I want to give.
Thank you, Claudia. Many executives see AI as a complete game changer, even bigger than the internet, right? So Martin, question. You have recently published Digital Humanism Management Guide. And what is the advice for executives on how to put people, planet, and profit in the best ways working together?
That's the topic of today, right? So I actually want to ask the audience, after these very clear words from my co-panelists, who thinks that ethics shall be discussed in business context and technology? Is ethics important? So we all know that, and Microsoft is doing it. You are asking the companies to do it. You're giving advice how to do it. And what we did is to make it easy for executives to adopt this way of including ethic in a day that used to be just money. The day of an executive, you know it, you live that life, right? But it's all about this short-term, this money, usage of a next tool to make more profit, stuff like this. And now we come to a situation globally in those countries that have the luxury to afford it, that we all feel that ethics is so important, especially now with AI, and the C-level understands that. Even from the shareholder value will of the big funds, there comes a very clear message. If you're not doing ESG, diversity and inclusion, for example, you won't raise any money on the global markets anymore. So the shareholder value will is going into that direction that we are asking today. So what the Executive Academy did, and the authors, our dean, Barbara Stöttinger, Martin Rohler, Yvonne Birkner, and myself, make it easy for the C-level with all of these reports and the legislations coming in to sit together with their teams and say, what is our digital impact? What can we do to make it better? Not with this big 2 million program, but today. And a lot of companies are coming up after using our digital impact method to say, for us it's important to prolong the usage of our laptops for 2 years. It's possible. They're good laptops. Or we only buy refurbed devices, the smartphones. They are taking measures. Or they're saying, after looking at our step-by-step guide and having participation of all the teams, they say, oh, it would be good that the next software that we are doing from our HR department, that we are really asking the stakeholders, the later users. And that we are looking not only if it boots up quickly or if it's available on the mobile, but if it may infringe a value. And there are no excuses anymore for the C-level that you're asking, Karin, because we have an ISO standard on ethical aspects of software design. It's an ISO standard, and the TÜV can put a stamp on it. And maybe you even get more talents because you are a company that is following digital humanism that we easily described in our paper and in our method. So there are no excuses anymore. We have this gut feeling, we have the shareholder will, we have the talents that only come to us if you're a good company. Microsoft is doing it. You are asking for it. You have the experience from your industries. So we are just right there. So I'm really encouraging you that you go onto our website, humanism.digital, download it for free. Why is it free? Because everybody should do it, right? And we have a grant from the Vienna Business Agency for that. I have to say that, it's a legal requirement. And you can start working on corporate digital responsibility, on ethics, and you don't have to wait for the AI Act. You don't have to wait for a legislation. You don't have to wait for the state to make better offices that make you a one-stop shop. You as a company can do it right away. So this would be the thing that Barbara and I, we thought, we as a business school, we have to put the science and the ethical requirements into practice, into business today. And this is with this paper, and that would be the advice for the C-level to do it. And if you are listening, I don't know, maybe for A1 boss, Thomas Arnoldner, he gave a speech on digital humanism in Alpbach, because it's important. If you are listening to Florian Turski, State Secretary in Austria for digitalization, he says our pole star of everything we do is digital humanism. When you're talking to the city of Vienna, you're just starting 2 program designs, very, very important for all of the citizens under the values of the ISO standard IEEE 7000. So no more excuses, no waiting for the AI Act. We all can act upon this, and we can earn money with it, we can do good, we can reduce our liabilities, and maybe we don't need all these reasons. Maybe we just do it because it's the right thing.
Yeah, thank you. Would you like to add something, Harold? Or yeah, feel free. Like, yeah, of course.
Just one inspiration you gave me just, and maybe you can answer this question. In the sustainability discussion, we have this scope 1, 2, and 3 approaches. Do you think it's possible to have a similar approach in ethics? So, because we are talking about principles when we have to bring this to practice. It's easier for me to have an ethical consideration for the things I do. It's more difficult to have my colleagues on the same side. And it's much more difficult to have my customer and the whole world on my side. Should we have a scope discussion? How to deal with the different scopes? Scope of influence, scope of reach?
I think the best thing to get not into planning and forecasting and setting up meetings with your suppliers in the scope 3 and understanding your customers and building up databases so you know your customers, what all of the banks and other companies, large companies, have to do with the taxonomy and the supply management laws that are coming. No, don't think about the second instance. Start with the direct question. With this HR system, with the application system for today, with the Foodora platform, me as a restaurant owner, what digital impact do I have by signing the contract with Foodora, Lieferando, or anyone else? What digital impact do I have on the people delivering the food? So just make your own responsible, as a C-level, as an executive, the thing that counts. And in our so-called complex world, there is this wonderful thing of you feeling responsible for yourself and starting with that. And the scope 3, scope 2 and scope 3, persons and companies, they will see that you as a market leader are doing that and they will follow you. You lead by example in a way where you said, it's the 21st century, we are fully digital, we have AI coming on the horizon to change this world again. Fundamentally, we are humans, and we are not optimistic about the technology. We are optimistic that we humans still are the ones making decisions, and especially decisions in our families, in our teams, in our companies. So I start with discussing TikTok with my 2 daughters. This is the first thing that I have to do. Then I go to my corporations where I'm invested and I talk with them about ethics of their systems. Then I come here and I try to convince 20 MBA students in a class. So sorry for being so enthusiastic, but let's not over-talk it, just do it. Let's have every day a value-based discussion about our business and our digital systems.
Okay, thank you. So now let's move. We covered the executives side and also customer, corporate, etc. So let's move to humanity. Okay. So there are great expectations of AI that AI can solve some big humanity problems. question for you, Claudia. Could you tell us more about how AI supports sustainable initiatives and share some examples?
Yeah, definitely. So I'd like to take a differentiated approach here and look at the sustainability issue from two easy to understand perspectives. So sustainability is defined as social, ecological, and economic sustainable. I leave out the economical component because we discussed this already a lot. And I just want to start off with the ecological component. So AI holds a lot of promises for solving global issues like ecological problems we have. There is a lot of money going into climate tech, for example, detecting inefficiencies, measuring, proposing ways to get more efficient, to reduce the carbon footprint. So that's a good message. On the other hand, regeneration. AI supports massively regeneration. It can detect where forests are lost, for example, where to plant which kind of trees to make sure regeneration happens. Or AI is also a very good boost for circular economy. I, for example, run a marketplace for social things like donations and stuff. And one of the things we do, we also sell second-hand clothes with Caritas in cooperation. And the business model for second-hand clothes is if you bring them online, it is exactly the same effort if I put this thing online for one time or for 1,000 times. So we have to be very efficient to make sure this business model works if we want to bring one thing online. And AI helps us massively. It does our pictures, it does with small prompts, the product descriptions and everything. So it enables business models. Ours is just a simple one, but now imagine cradle-to-cradle concepts and stuff like that that can be supported by AI. However, there is this notion of negative ecological footprint of AI, data centers, the energy they use, the growing number of data. If I sum this up, we did a lot of analysis there. We come to the conclusion, so my co-authors and me, that on the ecological side, the promise offers more a net positive effect. So there will be more positive effects coming out of this than negative effects because the ecological footprint is manageable. Microsoft is doing, for example, a lot, not like doing advertisement there, but there's a big race on making data centers more green and stuff like that. It's a topic that we as companies are aware of. So a lot of things are going on. But it's different if you look on the social side. There you have to be very careful, and there this concept of well-intended is not always well-executed holds true very much. There's a huge promise in health and education on the sustainability side, so more access to healthcare, cheaper access to healthcare, rolling out better education systems, but there are also examples where the things go terribly wrong with all the things that Julia mentioned, bias and stuff. So for example, the Austrian labor agency, employment agency, AMS, a few years ago, planned to allocate their resources more efficiently to people who could be better employed. It was a huge scandal a few years ago, and the issue they wanted to do was put the money where the employment chances are high. It's a good intention. It's really, don't want to waste money. We want to put money where, there's a high chance of employability. Unfortunately, the system was trained on data that discriminated against women because, if you put women and guys in the same pot, women normally take pregnancy leaves and stuff like that. So this discriminated against elderly and women. So the system had to be cancelled. So good idea, but the negative side effects were not mentioned. And I think if we look at AI services from the social perspective, it's much, much more important, or it's very, very important, that we also look at the unintended side effects. And what can we do about that? Like Martin said, involve all stakeholders, the people who are affected by the services, maybe civil society, governments, companies, everybody who's affected by solving this problem should be somehow involved in bringing this solution to the market. In normal design thinking, it would be clear, but it's not clear in the general public. So it has to be applied, and every single one of us can invite people to the table to get diverse views on developing new services. So that's my statement on that.
Harald, would you like to add something to sustainability topic? I know that Microsoft is doing, maybe you can share if you want.
Just to add one on social aspect, so ChatGPT is the biggest social experiment that has ever been happened. 300 million daily users trying to find some solution here. Scares
me now if you say social experiment. Coming from the telco industry, social media was also an experiment.
It is, because if you look at the legal terms, it's a preview edition. And you're giving feedback, and they're collecting and embedding their feedback in the product development to make it even better. Yeah? So with your daily usage, with your feedback, you contribute to, hopefully, to the improvement of the system and the service and the effectiveness of the service. Yeah? And that's the way normally products go to market. It's a most viable product that gets improved with customer feedback. Yeah? And I think that's what you meant, to some extent, is stakeholder involvement. The more stakeholders, the more participate and give feedback. Yeah? So if you feel the response of ChatGPT is wrong, hit that button, thumbs up or thumbs down. Maybe it improves the system. Yeah?
Thank you. Julia, do you see any great opportunities for AI to bring value within media, free speech arena, and society in general? So the benefits.
Yeah, thanks. Very easy question, especially as we have already established that I'm the biggest tech optimist on this panel. No, jokes aside, I mean, working on the intersection of technology and human rights is not necessarily what makes you super enthusiastic all the time, but I'm very glad that some of the issues were also discussed now on this panel. But I just want to maybe underline one point that I think is important that you mentioned, Claudia, is this scaling aspect of AI. So this is really the power of AI, is that it can scale decisions, which also means that if there are biases, for example, or if there are unintended aspects that were just not thought about, because also our past is not ideal, as we know, we have a lot of racialized and gendered biases in society, and we also have a very problematic kind of reflection of what is relevant in our history even. And if all of that is embedded into technology, it can scale it to an extent that not only amplifies these power imbalances, but really reinforce them, especially when we take in the global scale and not only look at what does us impact us here in Vienna, who are sitting now here in this room, but if you look at the global scale, if you look, I mean, we could now raise several examples up until like genocide in Myanmar, and they're really horrific examples of where technology did play a crucial, detrimental impact on horrific things leading to harms that, up to a genocide, as mentioned before. But also, I mean, if you look at the implications of technological uses for information warfare in the context of the Russian aggression in Ukraine, it's also, I mean, it has so many facets that it's really crucially important to be multi-stakeholder, to be inclusive, but also to link it back to what we discussed before about due diligence and doing these impact assessments before. But I know that wasn't your question, sorry. Of course, I should refer to positive examples. Of course, there are also in the field of now very narrow human content moderation or content curation, there are also positive examples. I mean, there is really cool research, and some of the things are already also being deployed of how, for example, AI can synthesize data that is lacking in the unrepresentative data feeding into AI tools so that we can overcome biases. There are specific tools being developed to empower marginalized communities, as you mentioned, also to bridge digital divides, gender divides. There's a lot that can really be improved on language divides that you mentioned before. There are some possibilities to really use technology also for safety features when we speak about, I don't know, quantum encryption or prioritized escalation channels when somebody is being targeted, when, for example, a human rights defender in an autocratic state is being targeted by the government. There are a lot of also technological usages of improving challenges that we face in society, but also many of the very useful and cool technological solutions are also really trying to address and overcome challenges that have been caused or created or amplified because technology has not been human rights based in the first place. So this is again kind of my call for we need regulation to make sure that there's first an assessment of what the implications are, to install safeguards before they can play out in reality. And then maybe one aspect that I think also somebody mentioned before, this aspect of accountability or kind of like responsibility. And I think, yes, humans make decisions, and also AI, I mean, there is this link of human decision, but we also need to have systems of checks and balances for the application of the AI itself. Because if we speak about any other realm or sector, be it, for example, the media, or also even governments, we all have systems developed over centuries to have some kind of accountability mechanisms if there are errors, if there are things that we are not happy with as a society. I mean, of course, this is democratic elections. Some work better, some work worse. But also for the media, I mean, there are ethical standards, code of conduct, there are industry-wide press council. And again, not saying that these systems are perfect, but there are checks and balances in place. And we have to make sure that whatever affects us as society, what impacts our information landscapes or our daily lives, and also jobs and productivity, are based on a system of checks and balances, of transparency and accountability, and that these things are considered from the outset, from before. And this is this principle of like human rights by design, human rights by default, and I just want to kind of like say that there are very good examples in small aspects and also in bigger potentials, but it only works if these key values and rights are really embedded and thought about from the very outset and then throughout the life cycle.
Thank you, Julia. As I said at the beginning, we can sit here until midnight, and it will go on and go on because this is such an interesting topic. But let's give a chance, thank you so much, but let's give a chance also an audience to ask questions. We are using a Slido, #dilemma. Can someone press it on the computer for people to actually, you will scan a QR code if I'm remembering well? Yes, thank you so much, thank you so much. So please scan this code and ask your questions. And meanwhile, we will have some questions from you. I think that the online audience can also use a Slido for raising their questions. I would like to maybe just to sum up in a way that, yeah, as always, powerful technology creates extreme opportunities, but also poses new risks, right? And balancing these two requires a caution. And yeah, it's a kind of an evolution of our humanity. So AI is the evolution, and the evolution is to believe in a future that we will support humanity while leaving no one behind, right? So I think that all of us, and you as well, agree on this. And maybe now we have some questions, so then we can. Or maybe someone from the audience just ask the question. Yeah, perfect.
Good evening. Hello. Iki Trina Levitska. It's actually Strategic Project Management Enrollment 2023. We didn't start yet, but it's quite a pleasure to be here. I've got a question because we discussed multiple topics within the AI topic in general. And the main question from my side, which I actually received internally in the different companies, which profession is going to be next popular? Because many are going to be distinguished in the future because of the AI improvement and development and so on. Do you have an access to the statistics or any type of data which says that in the following 5-10 years we are not going to have these specific professions at all on the market? That's a quite institutional, academical question, I would say.
Do you want to go first? I just have a recommendation for study. So I think the World Economic Forum, like 2 weeks ago, posted a study where they analyzed like every profession out there, like thousands of professions, and they really analyzed the potential of augmentation, automation, and will not be affected. And if you're interested in this topic, I truly recommend you to go in there. I have to admit I didn't screen all the, like whatever jobs, but like jobs that will be automated is everything that's going with service energy, service support and stuff like that. So call center agents and stuff, this is easily going to be replaced. Other stuff is harder, so manual work actually is quite hard to replace. So cleaning women, for example, is a job that I was surprised is men and women. So cleaning staff, sorry, thanks a lot, really thank you a lot. In German, I'm bad on that. So this is something that will not replace that much. So it's very interesting to see it because some of the jobs that are affected, you would not expect that they would be affected, and some of them are like it's very clear, are affected. So I really recommend you go on their website. They have it there. It's a very thoroughly done study, and you can basically look up every job you want to look up.
Thank you.
So I would recommend to look at Stanford University. Stanford has done a huge research. It's called Stanford 100.ai, 100 years change of job profiles, because jobs change over time continuously. There are tasks added, tasks going away. And I think that's the most, the biggest study I know so far. And they recently launched a Center for Responsible Machine Learning, which even extended the scope also to future estimations and things that might come up.
Is it a generic research or is it within the AI development?
The Stanford 100 is a generic research, thousands of job profiles, and the Center for Responsible Machine Learning is focusing on artificial intelligence and the impact of artificial intelligence itself.
So there were questions from the audience, so I might a little bit jump in and help. So Harald, I think you are the most appropriate one to answer this one. I know from the prep that you're not really comfortable, but there was the question of how will AI develop within the 5 and 10 years horizon?
So it's an exponential growing technology. It's a tool that can develop the next tool, also it can improve itself if you allow it. So it's exponential growing. I give you some ideas what this means. So currently we need a big data center or several big data centers to run ChatGPT. In 8 years, this will run on your smartphone. Yeah? And if you think above this, what does this mean? If it gets embedded in mobile technologies, embedded in robots and things like that, you get an idea what's evolving here. Yeah? Just a glimpse.
Thank you for the glimpse. So now, Martin, to you, and I'm on purposely just mixing and matching, so that's not maybe a typical question for you, but do you think that we in Europe are going to be at a disadvantage because we are over-regulating AI compared to some other continents?
I think we have a beautiful chance in Europe that we have to take. Why do we have to take the chance of making the better digital world here? Because we are not able to cope with Silicon Valley. We understand this now. And we don't want an Asian system maybe. So there is no other way than the European way, the third way of doing it, on the basis of our humanistic foundations that we have and our understanding. And that actually is not a disadvantage, it's an advantage. And even if we look at the very hot topic of GDPR, we understand that the large companies adopted this way, the European way, as an international pattern. So let's be brave, let's be bold, even though we are not on the first place when it comes to technology and innovation overall. Let's be bold and say, maybe we can do it not faster or higher, but maybe we can do it better for the people that are affected by it. And this might be a real business advantage for Europe.
Thank you, Martin. So there are many really good questions and more coming in, but you know, we already had a very long and cool discussion. So maybe the last one message from each one of you on what is your recommendation on a human level, like how could we how could we tackle this people, planet, and profit problem in the best way? So just from each one of you, the last message.
Yes, start, Martin, please.
My message is a very personal one, where I was very optimistic and I put forward the digital humanism as a way to steer it as a company. The last weeks where I learn a lot about AI and I use a lot of AI, I didn't get really, I had the problem that I'm more stressed now, because I have the potential, I raised the potential from the AI to really save 3, 4, 5 hours per week with the AI work, texts and pictures and so that I use for my work. But I didn't spend those 5 hours into time with my family or into more contemplating or going for a walk. I used it for more work. And so I learned a lot about AI, but what I really have to learn, and I offer this maybe as a point for others, is how to work correctly in a good manner so I can do it for a long time and be beneficial for society, and not because it's so cool and so fast and I can do more. I don't want to be transhuman. I want to be human.
Thank you. Claudia, please.
I want to be human is nice and impressive. So for me, I think it all boils down to we can only use the potential if we know what it's all about, and it's about literacy, understanding it. And there are 3 simple steps I want to give us as an advice for the day. First one, start educating yourself. You're sitting here, so you're aware of this. Second, take it to your dinner table. Discuss it with your family, friends, and acquaintances. I have 2 teenage sons. If I wait for school to educate them on what's going on, they will be overwhelmed. It will be way too late. So they have to understand what's going on. We have to discuss the implications for all of us. And third, and I think this is very important, I would be looking forward if we in 1 year from now not just have these discussions in the academic world or people with MBAs and stuff like that, but that is a discussion we as a society as a whole have, because most of us will be affected, and we all need to get involved.
Thank you. Just as a housekeeping information, I can see that the questions are popping up on the screen. You will have the opportunity to ask panelists during the networking after the demo. Okay? So please, Julia, now.
Yes, I will also say 3 things, quick things. So first, innovation, yes, but not a race to the bottom. Second, is that as long as we don't have human rights-based, responsible AI developed, we have to be human rights-based and responsible in the use of the AI, where everybody has a responsibility, from individuals to companies to states and international community as well. And the third, a little bit building on what you just said, Claudia, I think, yes, we need a whole of society approach and discussions, but in these discussions, let's also not forget we don't only want to talk about the future, about work and how we, and automation in our work aspects, but we really have to focus on the discussion, how do we want to live a society in the future? How can we ensure that we have an inclusive, peaceful, democratic society on the global scale, so we can actually move forward in a progress and sustainable way?
Thank you. And Harald, your closing words, please.
I just have to agree. Everything it's okay and fine for me. What really makes me optimistic is that more and more coalitions come up currently on a global scale. One coalition I would mention that's it's quite interesting. It's Coalition for Provenance and Authenticity. We discussed the threat to democratic institutions and so on, misinformation, fake news, disinformation campaigns. And we need a coalition to work together, fight disinformation, fight fake news. We need solutions for that, and that we have to come up on a global scale, because these are big international actors here threatening our democratic values, so to say. And we need a solution as society, and therefore coalitions, I would say, like your institution are fostering here, are very, very important for us.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. So, we are just running out of time, clearly, completely out of time. This is proving that this is such an interesting topic, and we even didn't touch the moment of, AI is kind of an Oppenheimer moment. If we will stop the process of just learning other AIs, what will actually happen? Then the others, typical Oppenheimer moment. Then we even didn't touch how big IQ has a ChatGPT? And all of these things, we can discuss it. By the way, it's almost to Einstein, and it's just ChatGPT 3.5. And I think ChatGPT 4 has even more, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So we can discuss it during the network. So now, please, I would love to welcome on stage Andrada Colcheriu. Andrada is from Microsoft. She's technical specialist for modern workplace and generative AI at Microsoft, and she will represent the Copilot demo, which means your AI companion for every day, okay? It's really pleasure having Andrada with us, because she can really show you the concrete example how actually AI can help you in your everyday life. And I would love to also mention that Andrada is also a strong advocate of female representation of the IT, and she's also a co-lead of Microsoft Women Resource Group in Austria. So welcome, Andrada. Thank you.
Thank you. Perfect. First of all, it was a very interesting conversation. I think we all learned a lot. And it was also interesting to hear different perspectives from everyone. But now, as my role is a technical specialist in modern workplace, we are focusing a bit more, okay, how and what did Microsoft do here from a productivity and modern work perspective. So we have ChatGPT, and Harald mentioned this in the beginning as well. We have a partnership with OpenAI, and we were considering and are considering leveraging the OpenAI models, Models 3.5 and Model 4.0, and we were thinking, okay, how can we bring that in our modern workplace? So whenever I talk about modern workplace, I'm talking about the Microsoft 365 suite. Maybe you have heard about Microsoft Teams, or Word, or PowerPoint, or all these things that are making your everyday work life a bit easier or better, and give you the tools in order, you know, to just do your work. So from here on, we just brought these models in, and we created, and again, we are calling Microsoft 365 Copilot. It's not supposed to be an autopilot. It's supposed to be your virtual assistant. It's supposed to be helping you, you know, just being, and this was mentioned as well, just being more productive. And we are going to see, okay, in what levels and how can that improve. So Microsoft 365 Copilot is going to be included in all these applications that I already mentioned, and it's going to be available with the 1st of November. It was just announced last week. So we are very eager to show that. I just want to give a short disclaimer. I'm in a demo environment, which is still in a preview, so if something breaks, it might happen. So I wanted, you know, just to give a short intro in what I'm showing, and more than happy to have a discussion afterwards. I have been using it for a while now, so I think it's interesting maybe to hear my perspective later on as well, how has improved my work-life balance maybe as well. So let's have a look. So whenever we are doing this type of demos, we are trying, you know, to position ourselves in the shoes of the audience. And in this case, as we have, there is no signal. No sync? Okay. Perfect. So because we are here at the WU Executive Academy, I just imagined I'm an executive, I'm a financial executive in my company, and I have an annual report. So I'm Anna Veles. I have an annual report in Microsoft Word. It's the end of the fiscal year. I have some information about sales, research and development, some information here. And I just want to present it in a PowerPoint presentation to my whole organization. Now that usually means either someone does it for me or I do it manually and it takes a lot of time, which I don't have or I don't want to spend just creating a PowerPoint presentation. So what Copilot will be doing for me is helping me out. And again, I'll be just pushing this idea. It's Copilot because it'll give me a canvas, it'll give me something that I can work on, and of course, if some things might be missing or I want to add, I can continue working with Copilot in improving the presentation that Copilot created for me, or, you know, of course, I can do it manually as well, moving forward from there. So I just showed you that I have this Word document, and from here, I just go and I start with it and I transform a file. And I will just go in the report itself. Usually it comes up not this time around. And here I just put in the link. And now based on the link, it will start searching for the link that I put in, which will search through my environment and find a link, and based on that, with the models that we have, it'll create a PowerPoint presentation. So, of course, in some cases, it might take a bit longer. Some cases, it's just a bit faster. You always have to take into consideration what you have in the backend or what you're leveraging. So if a document is 30 pages long, it'll take a bit longer than the other ones. So in the meantime, what I also want to show you, it's just finishing up. I always can go back in a report that I have or a Word document, and I can also edit that document and ask Copilot to rewrite it for me, right? So I don't like this paragraph necessarily. I can have one thing rewriting or visuals as a table, which I think is very cool. See, it's still working. But in the meantime, let's see how this looks. So we have some data here, but it's basically text, but I want a table out of it, so I'm clicking visualize as a table. So Copilot will, again, as we would do with ChatGPT as well, we're just asking for it to create a table for us. Okay, as I was mentioning, sometimes, worst case, I have a video that I took yesterday, how it works. So I'll just try one more time. If not, we're going through the video. It's the same Word document. It's the same thing. Let's just try it one more time.
No worries, Andrada.
Yeah.
That's technology, okay?
No, but it's, the table has been created for me, so I have the data here, right? And it's created a table, I don't have to do that anymore. So if you just think about it, how much that would take just to copy and paste information, probably 5 minutes per day already that has been, that I can leverage for something else. So let's take it one more time and see if it wants to work. And in the meantime, I want to show you another thing. I'm still the financial executive, right? And I want to create an intranet news post. So I have, again, the same document where I'm starting from, and based on that, I can go in a Word document, and again, I'm chatting with Copilot, and I'm asking Copilot to create an intranet news post for me that I can post for my whole organization so that they know what's going on. So it's still finishing up. Let's just wait for this to finish, and then I'll just show you the other thing. I'll be writing in the meantime the prompt. So create a news post for our intranet based on, and again I can reference a link. Let's see if it comes up. If not, we can just put in the link. Finishing up. We'll wait just one more minute, and if not, we'll just have a look at the video that's already open here.
Maybe a question just to, so how much time usually it takes Copilot to actually transform the file? Or what are the implications, why it's taking so much time? So is it a network, or
it could be the network, honestly, and also because I'm in
a
very
cloud, right?
private, like I'm a very preview environment, so that's why.
Okay.
Usually, and I'll just show you the video, and it's exactly the same thing. Maybe 30 seconds, maybe 1 minute, so it's never, you usually know when something like this happens that something is going on in the back end. So again, I'm creating a presentation from a file, the same Relay Crowd. This time around, it showed up right away, and then it was working on it. And again, as I said, 30 seconds to 1 minute, and then here down, we can already see that something has been created, right? So
wow, that's amazing, actually.
So PowerPoint presentation has been just created, and what I'm showing here is we had, again, text. And the cool part about this, text has been created in a table in the file. And also, we had this photo in that file, which was shown as well. Now, I don't have enough information, but another cool thing, it also generates notes for you. So if you have a presentation and maybe you're in a virtual call and you want to present it, it shows you, first of all, the original content where the information comes from, but secondly, it generates you new notes that you can, just leverage. So it's prepared for you. Everything is going to be prepared for you. But as I was mentioning, it's not enough. I still need more information about a specific department that hasn't been necessarily used here. So I say add a slide about the marketing campaigns that were happening. So again, we are leveraging the document that has been referenced, and based on that, it's going to analyze again the document and eventually create a slide for me. And that's one part, and we were mentioning about fairness at some point, and we're talking about languages. The good part is it also supports multiple languages. So I can say at the moment we are around 8 languages that we're supporting. We are extending on that, but in this case, I'm already writing in German, füge eine Folie über Kundenprogramme hinzu, and it's going to, because my prompt was in German, and they assume that I want the thing in German, but of course you can also write in German and say I need it in English. It will create it in German. So it supports multiple languages, and as you were mentioning about, books and all that, it works just all right. Okay, so we're
May I ask you, sorry,
Yes?
sorry to interrupt, but I'm really curious. So when you are adding these prompts into Copilot,
Yeah.
so these prompts, so the source of the information, how you are feeding your Copilot with the prompt is coming only from the document, or Copilot has also an access to more sources that basically can even suggest you from maybe other reports that other maybe HR, like how this is consolidated all together on a company level or only on a document? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, and I would say it depends. It depends on the prompting. So basically, if I reference a file exactly, it will take the file, but of course in the backend it will leverage the model 4.0, so it will create the text based on how it learned from OpenAI, let's put it that way, but it will always reference and take the information only from that specific file. And that's
Okay.
the good part about it, because it will be very hard to hallucinate, which might happen, but in this case is when you're specifically referencing something, it's way harder. And again, you always will have to double check what Copilot wrote for you, but you have that information already. But when you're not referencing, it'll be a mix of your information that you have access to and the intranet, and of course the models that are in the backend.
Yeah, thank you. We didn't cover today the topic of AI hallucinations because we didn't have time, but I assume that you know that this is the common problem, technological problem. There is a question. Okay.
Yeah.
Can we pass a mic? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's, okay.
My question was actually related to the file itself.
Yes.
So when you give this file to Copilot to create a new presentation, does the file remain on your computer, or is it also shared to a virtual database?
That's a very
Or
good question. So
server
we're
somewhere.
always working with the Microsoft Cloud, right? So you as an organization have the Microsoft 365 tenant and your environment, and within that tenant in the products called SharePoint or OneDrive, you are storing information, you're storing data. Now the data will remain there. The data will not be stored in OpenAI models or anything like that, and it will be not trained. So everything that you give to the model itself, it's working with the Azure OpenAI model, that it's not leveraging it for any training purposes or for anything in that direction, so you're not sharing the data. The data will always stay within your environment, within these Microsoft 365 boundaries.
No worries, your file will not appear on a ChatGPT, okay?
Yeah.
That's someone else.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
No,
no
more
worries.
than happy to talk about that later because, of course, and I think I was talking to Julia about that, that's always a concern, but this is an enterprise-ready product that can be also used in Europe. That's a very important and underlying thing. So it's not being shared, it's not being used for training, it's not being stored, not even the prompts are being stored in our environments, whatever Microsoft, it will always disappear. But on the other hand, it will never learn from your mistakes from prompting, let's say, right? So if you put like a wrong prompt or you want it to learn how you're working and things like that, it will not do that.
So you can limit it to your organization and that's it?
Yes, correct.
And you cannot, and it's not allowed to take like other experiences from other organizations or from the overall.
It's not possible. There's no option to do that, to take experiences or learnings from other organizations. It's just built like that, that you're always within your Microsoft or your organization's environment and boundaries.
Okay,
So
thank
you have your secured cloud, which you are paying for,
Yeah.
and then your data are securely stored.
Yes. Yeah. One more thing that I want to show, it comes everywhere, so I'm assuming you work also with a lot of emails, you don't want to read the emails. In the email, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good.
Please show us this feature, and then I think that we
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. Okay, one short thing, summary by Copilot. So you see we have a very long email thread here that you don't have the time to read. Again, probably 5-10 minutes from your time. You don't want to do that. You just click summary by Copilot and it will analyze the thread and it will give you a short summary of it, with references as well. So that's the cool part. If you want to read more about something in particular, you can just click on the reference itself. It's looking for key points, and it created something for me right here. So time-saving one, and then the best thing that this is a personal thing, maybe Harald can also, say more to this when we're doing the networking. It's available in Teams. So if you activate transcription, and I'll just show you shortly. If you activate transcription and you join the call 10-15 minutes later and you don't want to interrupt everyone, you're just asking, okay, what has been discussed already, recap the meeting so far, and we'll do a recap for you. We'll do now, after the meeting, again, recap the meeting. The meeting was in German as well, so I can talk to Copilot in English, I can ask to get the recap in German, whatever you want. It will always consider your prompt and your Microsoft Office setting, so if you have everything in English, it'll rather give you an answer in English. So now it's recapping the meeting, is going to the transcript, and we know that the transcript sometimes is maybe not the most accurate because, let's take German, dialects, and if someone from Tyrol or from Oberösterreich speaks with a very heavy dialect, it might not take up on it, but the context will understand everything. So here is a recap of the meeting. This is a project launch readiness call that we had about Project Falcon. There were some disagreements, but see, everyone was mentioned, what we discussed as well. And also, if I don't have time, I don't want to read everything. I just want to know what are my to-dos. And it will understand that I'm Andrada in this case, that I was mentioned, and that there are some to-dos for me. And based on the transcript, your to-dos are to double-check the technical feasibility, to work on the early access program, to check the technical requirements, because I was the engineer in this demo call. So, and this can go from everywhere you want. Like, you want to ask some particular question. If it doesn't have the answer, it even gives you the answer, I don't know, it was not mentioned, so at least you know it hasn't been mentioned. So, I might sound or be very excited, but like from a productivity perspective, it really changes how we work, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrada. This was fascinating. I love this, specifically with the email. So imagine that you are having an email with maybe 5 people in CC, you know, a summary, and all those 5 people are doing something else, and it will give you to-do list for you. So it's amazing. Thank you very much. Let me now ask Katarina, our president of Female Leaders Network, to say a few words and actually close this amazing, amazing panel. Please,
Wow,
Katarina.
thank you, Karin, and thank you, panelists and Andrada. What an exciting evening, what an exciting multidimensional discussion. I have learned a lot. And you know, if one message stays with me, it's important that we keep learning and that we also bring others up, that we have these discussions not in a public, but also in on our dinner tables. And I will raise my hand to be in a group with, I think, everybody, but Martin and Claudia said, I'm also human, I want to stay human. I mean, there is nothing better than be human. And I think for a human being, nothing beats the human interactions. So us sitting together will never beat any kind of productivity or any kind of technology. Therefore, I will not keep you longer than in, you know, joining the networking session, enjoying discussions together. And just before, I really don't want to make this an Oscar-winning award and now thank everybody, but I have to really say thanks a lot for an amazing conversation to our panelists. Great moderation to Karin. Andrada, thanks for a great demo. I can't wait, this email features. Oh my God, my life's gonna get better. Yeah, also, I think it's so generous when people bring their communities together. And to that, I want to thank personally to Martin for bringing his business world from Microsoft and also the Executive Academy together. I want to thank Executive Academy for being our academic home always, also after 10 years after graduation. Viola and Gina for, I don't know, girls, how you do it. I mean, this was just the tip of the iceberg. They were responsible for 3 other events today, and it's unbelievable. And last but not the least, also to my fellow Female Leaders Network for being there, for always pushing and making inspiring things, and especially to Karin and to Natalia for making sure that this event happens today.
And now please just enjoy yourself with a glass of wine or, yeah, just network. Thank you.